Wednesday from the Redneck Garage. Well, I haven't been able to do much on the Jeep Cherokee, so that kind of sucked. However, I'm about to be back on diagnosing what's wrong with it. So sometimes it's easy to just look at the individual part and go, okay, that cap's busted, or that wire's off, or here's something that's burnt. And then other times it becomes a lot more difficult, and that's where you have to use scanners and books and media and things like that. Now, Jeep and Chrysler, in their infinite wisdom, came up with service manuals, but they weren't very much help as far as diagnosing things that are wrong. So they came up with powertrain diagnostic procedures, which was a whole separate book, which is great, because then you'll go in this book and they'll say, look at the service manual. It's kind of back and forth. However, there is one section in it. Most of it deals with your codes. If you get a code on your car, like a P, whatever it is, you can look it up here and it'll kind of tell you what it is. Now, we don't have any codes on the vehicle. Thankfully, in the manual it says, engine cranks but does not start is our symptom. And it gives you a step-by-step procedure, basically a flow chart of what to do to get to the end result of getting it to start or finding out what's wrong. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through step 1 through 25 or whatever it is. Down at the very back it says ignition off. If there are no potential causes remaining, view repair options. Repair, replace the PCM. So at the end of this, if all these things don't work, then it is the PCM, and I was right, which I've got one coming. I don't have it yet. So we're going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to briefly describe what the Powertrain Diagnostic Manual says to do. And it's going to be kind of a cool step procedure on what we do to get this thing running. I've got the old Chrysler MT2500 scanner, and these take a personality key when you use OBD2. And the personality keys slide in there, and it takes it, for this model, takes a K13, which I didn't have, so I had to order one of those. Otherwise I'd already be probably finished with this job, or waiting on a part and knowing what it is. So it's going to be interesting. I'm going to show you what happens when I get the K13. I think I'm going to go borrow one from Bobby at Bobby's Automotive. He's got this old scanner too. We should be able to go through each individual component and show voltage to it and show that it's reading correctly in the ranges. This has a pretty good troubleshooter. I just didn't have that personality key, which made me feel like a cripple. So anyway, that's what we're waiting on. As soon as we get that, then I'll show you what else we're looking at. And there is my spark tester, which we have none. And here's my Jeep. And actually, because of this, I've gone backwards. I pulled off the distributor cap and rotor to put on that truck. That's what it looks like. Basically, you don't have anything in it except for this metal plate that goes around, and it senses that, and that's what does the timing portion of it. But I've taken off parts, this one to put on this truck, so I've gone backwards on the Jeep this week, and that's really nice. I love it. Okay, so we're up to number 5. We've already done all this other stuff just right off the bat. Number 5 is remove distributor cap while cranking engine, watch for rotor to turn. So we're going to check that. Check. Okay, so now we got to turn the ignition on, and then with the DRB activate the ignition coil, which I can do with my snap-on scanner. Okay, I got my tester hooked up to the coil hot lead in the redneck office because it's warm. Yesterday I had a really exciting day working on the Jeep. Yesterday afternoon after work, and it was cold and it snowed for the past couple days, so as I was working on it, snow was falling into my tools, and I finally just hung it up for the night because I was just like, forget this is just stupid. So today I'm looking at it again, kind of going over the simple stuff, thinking, did I miss something? Is there something that I'm not getting? I've got the flow chart on what we're going to do, so I'm going to try to go back through that again. Now, this old brick is actually a pretty good old scanner for, you know, some of the older functions. So I went in and I went into the troubleshooter. I got to turn the key on, sorry. And what I'm looking for is the current and crank sync, right? And that tells you if it's getting a signal from the current cam and crank sensor. So I cranked it over, and it kept saying lost, lost, lost. And I was thinking, well, I put a new crank sensor on it, but the cam sensor I switched out from my TJ, so I went ahead and I'd ordered another one to replace for the TJ. And when I plugged it in and you crank it over, we'll see if it actually... My. There we go. So all this crap goes back to the cam sensor that I swapped out from the TJ, and evidently it was bad to start with. which is unusual because it was running when I turned off the motor, but who knows what happened to it since then. And the coil actually tested out pretty good on it, so I didn't have to replace the coil. So this cam sensor from the TJ that I swapped over evidently is bad. That's my guess. Now I know that the crank sensor was bad because all the insulation had fallen off of it. And was there a relationship between it going bad, maybe shorting out and shorting out the other one? Yeah, no, that's possible too. But the PCM was fine. And that was frustrating, but we got her running, so I am super happy about that. I'm gonna get everything zipped back up and we can get back to work on the Jeep. Okay, so as this video comes to a close, there's some takeaways on this, right? First of all the insulation was off the crank sensor. There was a cam sensor code that showed up, P0340, I think. And was this related to it? I think maybe it was. I could be wrong, but there was no insulation on the crank sensor, and at some point this would have failed for sure anyway. The second takeaway is even though you swap it out with a part from one that's running, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good. So that was really frustrating. Third part is a scanner, whatever kind you have, is invaluable if you have diagnostic procedures in your scanner. And I'm going to be looking into buying a little bit better one than this old one. But this actually did diagnose the crank and cam synchronization. When I cranked it over, it started showing fail. And I was like, okay, but I just swapped both those out. And I was like, okay, so one of them's got to be bad. I looked at the crank sensor and thought, well, that one's brand new. The cam sensor was one I swapped from an old vehicle, put it in, and it started right up, and it showed synchronization good. So there you go. This was actually able to pinpoint my problem with the Jeep, even though I thought that I'd put a good one in. Evidently, both of these are bad. And it's just a Hall effect sensor, so I wouldn't think these go bad, but evidently they do. I don't know what happened to it. Anyway, so that's going good. And the last takeaway I would say is if your truck doesn't start, don't sit there and grind the starter, because you're going to end up having to buy a battery and a starter and then start from scratch again. This was pretty frustrating. Some of it was the temperature. Most of it was that stinking part. Now, the last thing that I would say to you is that this part here at AutoZone is $89, right? I bought them on eBay for $32. It's the same Chinese part from probably the same warehouse, $32 versus $95 with tax, somewhere around there. Order you a couple spares if you got a Jeep. Get a couple of these ignition parts if you want to, and keep them in stock just in case something goes bad, because the cost of this, a crank sensor, cap and rotor, is less than the one part from AutoZone. Awesome! We got the Jeep running, Christian's happy. And let me tell you, I'm happy. Finally got out of the snow. It's starting to melt, and hopefully this weekend I'll be able to put some stuff back on my Jeep and we can continue on trying to put that stinking thing back together. But I'm just really tickled that we got him going. It's a good day. I'm David from the Redneck Garage. Keep turning wrenches.